There we go. It's Fairfield County Live and Local. We're presented by the Sono Collection. My name is John Kamal from 95.9 The Fox. My guest tonight never fails to be a big deal every single time he's in town. And this is going back like a decade now of That's Just Me living in Black Rock. When Renard is in town, it's always a party. Whether you know him personally or not, you're going to go see him live. Renard, dude, thank you so much for being here from Nardy Boy. We appreciate it.
Dude, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate it. Good to see you. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too, man. And I meant that, by the way. Like we got to know each other a little bit at shows over the years, but every time you're in town, there's like a buzz in the Black Rock area. It's like, oh, you know, Renard's here. Nardy Boy's going to be playing at the Acoustic, or Renard's playing at the Harborview Market on Sundays, or, you know, just all over the place. For people who don't know you, you're you know, a band leader. You've been a session player. You've played with the Neville Brothers, Mystic Bowie, Delfeo Marsalis, but you're a New Orleans native.
Mm-hmm.
You're from the greatest music scene in the country. What's the CT connection?
Okay, so the quick and dirty is, let me sort of unravel it. I transferred to college in Vermont. My roommate was from Newtown. After I graduated, I stayed in touch with him. I eventually came up to Connecticut in like the Northeast officially again in 96 with my second wife for grad school. I was hooking up the bands. It was right after I just did a couple shows with the Nevilles in the summer of 96. Art Neville's like, dude, keep playing. And I'm like, okay. So I called Jason Clements, and Jay's an amazing dude. He actually does his own. He's done work with like Cirque du Soleil and stuff like that. He actually started working with United Staging years ago, in fact. And so like he and I stayed in contact, and he hooked me up at the scene in Sono at Amberjacks, and then kept playing. Eventually met Mystic Bowie, played with him, moved back home in 2003, was coming back and forth. Katrina happens, and I could have gone to Chicago, I could have gone to Texas, but I knew far more people in Connecticut, and I was like, I literally went 2 days after Katrina. I'm on a plane to New Haven, and then 3 days after that, we're playing a weekend of shows in Block Island. So pretty much I was like, people were like, so you're going to stay? And I said, yeah, I'll camp out here for now. And then camping out here for now ended up being like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, you know? So, yeah. So.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
It was Katrina that it wasn't Katrina that brought you up here, but it was Katrina that brought you up here to stay for an extended period of time.
Yeah. And it was actually good because I'd already gotten to know the area a little bit, but more importantly, I'm a generally friendly guy. So kind of like, you know, people like, oh, come jam with us, come do this. I'm like, yeah, sure. They, you know, hire me for gigs, and just getting to know different people gave me a sense of what I could do. So I kind of knew when I made the decision to come to Connecticut and like quote unquote make a decision to stay, it seemed like a smart thing. And then like literally after Katrina, when I was up, I was going to like Monday night open jams at Ray Kelly's with Christopher Robin. Yeah. I eventually started going to the Tuesday night open mics at the Acoustic. Chef's Table, Rich Hertzfeld, Dave Griffiths, dude, they like built me a home, you know, at Chef's Table. So I was playing like 3 days a week on the weekdays, and on Saturdays I eventually had a band playing, for a good while with Chris Morrison, Steve Clark, and Kurt Bergwin. The Torreses over at Harborview, John and I started jamming together, and then his parents were like, would you love to come and play here? I'm like, absolutely. So it was really like a lot of different, like, people were just very welcoming, and they just made it feel very much like a place for me to just kind of camp out and like live for a while. And, you know, it just became a good sort of organic thing too, because being from New Orleans, I don't need a whole lot to get stuff done. And I think that made it easier to work with people, because they were like, some people like, oh, I got to have this, I got to have that. I'm like, just give me a small PA, a microphone, a stool, and I'm good, you know? Right.
Right. Well, it's so funny that you bring that up, because, you know, you're mentioning so many incredible like local musicians, a lot of whom have been on the show. I actually just had John on a couple of weeks ago talking about the reopening of the Acoustic as the Park City Music Hall. Yeah. But you know, I mentioned before that you're from the greatest music scene in the entire world. You're from New Orleans. But you were able to find like kind of a connection here. what are the similarities between the New Orleans music scene and, you know, the Black Rock, Greater Fairfield County music scene?
Yeah. I think just in general, just the openness of musicians that I got to know.
Right.
I mean, the most important person I met in this whole mix was Kurt Berglund. So Kurt was a WestConn graduate, music person, jazz person, and he had this incredible network of musicians that he worked with and played with. And he put me in touch with Mike Nuno. Mike put me in touch with other people. And you know, so like some of the people like Matt Garrity, who was a bass player who studied with Brian Torfer over at Fairfield. Matt's killing right now, man. Matt's Just Play project. He's been nominated for Grammys twice. Matt studied with Steve Clark for a little bit too. It was just like all these people. So, and they were all playing. And what was cool was like they were. When I say they were literally just playing, you walk in and like, oh, come check me out here, come jam with us, or that, the other, and just by being in touch with people. So in New Orleans, it's the same kind of thing. Like, you know, you make alliances and whatever, and it's a little different in how people kind of get together, but it's still very much an open, welcoming scene. And then you just kind of hook up with people. So the interesting thing is when I returned in 2011, I was just kind of dealing with like whatever stuff and just getting settled in again. I started meeting, you know, people there. Michaela Harrison, who's a phenomenal singer. This wonderful singer I still work with. Actually, I'm going to be going out to Seattle after I leave Connecticut. Manaz Hussain is originally from Mumbai. She had been on BMG Universal.
From Mumbai.
I met her through Mumbai, India. Yeah,
and, right on.
She was in New Orleans, and I met her through Michaela. And we've been working together since 2012 or something like that. And so in that same way, it's just making connections and meeting good people. Andrew McLean, who's a phenomenal engineer and musicologist kind of thing. And actually, we got Mystic to come down in New Orleans and do like some specs for like some of his other tracks there, because he kept saying, who is this person you were telling me about? And I said, well, go, come on down and meet him. And so it's a kind of a broadening out. And what's interesting is we're finding out there's like sort of cross-pollination. Andrew worked with some people like Michael Ray from Cosmic Crew, who Michael had worked for Deep Banana, or worked with Deep Banana at one point. And it was like the closing of circles in a lot of ways and stuff like that. So,
I mean, it sounds like it's just really comes down to just the diversity of musicians, just in terms of style and in terms of, you know, the amount of different people who are all after the same goal of trying to just be creative and you know, and collaborate. I think the word that I was looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned a bunch of different projects that you worked with, and you know, I mean, just looking at your blog site, you've played in jazz, reggae, you know, straight up rock, jam rock, zydeco, whatever. Depending on what project you're in and who you're playing with, is the vibe different depending on what kind of music you're playing, or is a band just a band at the end of the day?
Oh, the vibe's totally different. If a lot of it, so first of all, it comes down to the people. Are they good people? You know, and I'm talking about like, you know, when they come to perform and stuff like that. And then are they serious about the music that they're making? And, you know, it's like, the money's important, and because we all got to pay bills. But then the integrity of what they're doing is really the key. So even if, for example, I'll be very honest with you. Like, I couldn't listen to the Dead going to school in Vermont. And in fact,
that's a dangerous thing to say in Vermont. I was going to say that's a dangerous thing to say in Black Rock, but in Vermont, that's even crazy.
No, trust me, I know. So it was really funny because I would sit there and hang out with my friends, and I'd be like, "Yo, man, like I'm trying to get into this, but like I'm not feeling there's not a group." Well, it turns out, and so the tune "Fire on the Mountain," that when I was in school in Vermont, friends either took me to a place in Saratoga, or a band came to like Spree Day Festival at Southern Vermont College, whatever, and there was this tune, but they were all saying "Fire Up the Ganja." So I thought it was like a reggae tune that, you know, that eventually when my friends were playing the Dead versions, like, oh man, this is like some reggae tune they're covering. But I didn't care because they were doing that with like Louisiana tunes. They were covering Louisiana tunes. So when I started working with people up here, and really great guy, Phil Forbes, like, you know, I met through Kurt Berglund. And Phil's like, you know, great jazz player, but he's also into like Jazz is Dead and Rat Dog. And he's like, look, man, he says, there are a few tunes I think we could do as a quartet. So this is when I was still in a band called had a band called the Freelance Pallbearers.
Yeah.
And we had kind of merged that with Mystic's band, but we kind of took it back a little bit for a while. And this is before Nardy Boy became a thing. And we started playing at the bitter end on Fairfield Avenue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And dude, we were like playing. What was great was, so the crowd was really receptive, and we would sometimes have people come in and jam with us, but mostly we would just hold down, the four of us, and we could take the music anywhere. And I think in the other quartet that I was working with was, we called it Rambunction over at Chef's Table, but we played at the Red Door in Watertown on like their jazz and sushi nights. Called it the Renard Boissiere Quartet, and so it's me, Chris Morrison, Steve Clark, and Kurt Bergman. And again, it was like you could take the music anywhere with people. And so what we found were like they were just really receptive crowds, and they weren't necessarily resistant to certain things. So some of the jazz guys, if I snuck a Zydeco tune in there, they're like, okay, I can deal with that. Like, or if I was with some of the jammier groups or projects, the people were like, if we snuck something that was a little more freeform. And so something like Fire, where I started with this, so Fire on the Mountain became like a tune where I figured out it's just 2 chords. Well, we can make this something bigger than what it is. So invariably, if we needed something to jam to, we just kind of set up with like whatever rhythm or feel worked with the group we're in the moment. And I think the people I worked with for the most part were just receptive to doing different stuff. Or they would ask me, and I said, well, can you do this and do that? And I'm like, yeah, because ultimately I grew up listening to lots of different music anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm like, first of all, we used to listen to radio in New Orleans, and the stations we listened to played a wide variety of stuff. Both of my grandmothers listened to. I mean, I grew up in a house where my dad would like have B.B. King and Jose Feliciano blasting in the mornings, and then he was like a big Doobie Brothers fan. So you kind of hear all this music, and it's like, and then so of course when people start getting older and people start asking you to make choices, I'm like, I don't know, I like it all. I mean, I grew up as a big P-Funk fan,
Yeah.
So and learning in the backwards way that P-Funk, and there was a connection between that and Sun Ra and whatever. So, again, it's just, for me, it's just about the people you hang with and the music you make and what they're about to do and stuff like that.
Well, and I mean, using the Dead as a template too is just, it makes it so easy to move it into different genres. I spoke to Terrapin a couple of months ago, great Dead cover band, and they said that what makes that kind of music so much fun is that it's so malleable. I mean, you can take a song like Fire on the Mountain, and you could, I mean, it's basically already a reggae jam to begin with. You know what I mean?
Right,
and it's,
right,
you could put a Zydeco thing on it if you want to. You could speed it up. You can slow it down. But that, I mean, so, well, yeah. Anyway, so you as a band leader, though, I mean, working with with as many different musicians as you do, is it? I guess what I'm asking is, when you're a band leader, do you consider yourself like, the orchestrator, the arranger, or is it just the guy giving the cues, or does that really all mean the same thing? Because I'll see you on stage like shouting out to the 4, to the 4, to the 4 all the time. Yeah, man.
Well, so when I was working with Freelance Pallbearers, when I was working with Rambunction, different set of musicians, like in terms of like where we were and how we communicated. And then what happened with Nardy Boy, because it kind of came up organically through the acoustic. So I actually did Nardy Boy first at the bitter end. We played Gathering the Vibes one year, and I kind of put a hodgepodge of musicians together for that set. And then after that, I was like, okay. And so I used to do this thing. I guess I used to rattle some people's cages. I used to play split pedal with an octave pedal, and so we didn't have an official bass player on stage. But I grew up playing bass and guitar. I actually learned guitar to play bass, and I play keyboards as well. So like I'm always thinking consciously of arrangements and stuff with bass in mind. And when I used to do the split pedal thing, it was like I could actually dictate what inversions were happening, and I just needed people who were cool with that, like whatever. And so eventually, Nardy Boy became this arrangement between me, Mike Tepper, Steve Detroit, Mike Palucci, Will Secchi, and actually even at Chef's Table, it's kind of, I was playing around with different stuff, and I said to like these guys, I said, yo, like I always work with the other guys for certain things, but for the looser kind of jammier stuff, I'd like to work with some of your other, some of the younger cats. And Chris Morrison told me about Dave Porter,
Yeah.
New Porter through another group. He was playing with Jared Torf at one point, and knew him through there. And so we just kind of started working out on Wednesday nights at the Acoustic, and I can't thank the Acoustic enough for giving us Wednesdays. And we would do stuff like, I would just come with ideas, and I'm like, okay, well, like, let's do this, or we come up with lines. I'd have lines and ideas, and I kind of sing the melodies, and they mimic it and stuff. And I mean, one of the funnier covers not say funnier because it was fun. We used to cover Bonita Applebaum by Tribe Called Quest, and that the chords are all jazz, so like we just have a groove. We'd have people kind of like jump in and like guest rap on the spot, and it was really great. So out of that month long or however long residence we had, it just these tunes, those ideas that I came up with, and then we take like covers and we completely break them and then kind of make them whatever we were doing. And so like our version of Congo Square, which I had to learn originally when I played those 2 nights with the Nevils in '96, I can play Congo Square like 5 different ways and never it's probably one of the longest standing covers that I've played, just because I play it so many different ways depending on who the lineup is. And even with Nardy Boy, we would play it like 3 or 4 different ways depending on the mood and the night and stuff like that. So.
Well, like it's I mean, just the ability to move so seamlessly though with different groups of musicians, because I have heard a couple different iterations of the band over the years. It does really speak to your ability to hold it down while also involving the crowd and keeping spontaneity
Right.
a thing. Now I know you're a teacher too.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw, because I had to do a little bit of research on you, as soon as I saw that you were a teacher, as soon as I saw that you were a teacher too, the first question that jumped into my mind is what are the differences and similarities between running a classroom and running a band? Because I used to work in education, and I can think of a few of them.
Oh, there's a whole lot. So I just said to someone recently too, most of the people I've worked with in bands who like really gel are people who either spend time in school band or a jazz band or like some kind of like organized ensemble or whatever. And occasionally you get people who are like kind of gunslingers and soloists and like whatever, and they work, but like by and large, you find people who are willing to kind of like they're humble, they understand what their role is. It might be this today, it might be this tomorrow, like we might need to do whatever. And so literally and to be fair, I grew up around a lot of educators. So that I went in education at some point was almost like kind of like an accident. And then once I got into the classroom, like in my 20s, I could come back home to New Orleans, and I'd come from everyone back home like, oh, you went to some hippie school in New England. I'm like, no, it's just a small college in New England. But I got to work at 3 of the best schools in the city, and they were willing to give me some leeway with like how we're in my classrooms. So we actually would do things. And one of my former students, she's like, oh, when you at my alma mater, high school alma mater, she's like, yeah, like the day you came in with like music and you made us sit on the floor and you turned off the lights and like let's listen to the soundscape for like 10 to 15 minutes and then like write your impressions. And I said, well, we could have done the boring thing. I said, or we could have done something more stimulating. And like, because I wasn't there to glorify myself. I was really there to make sure that they could develop their ideas. And right. I was just constantly thinking about, because my alma mater is a school for like, high IQ people. And like, well, what would I wanted to do as a student that my teachers didn't do? We still did the things we had to do, but like, whatever. And so even in the classroom, like, since I went back into the classroom, I'm all about like, here, once I tell you what we need to do, turn over the keys and you guys run it. And so most of my students now, like, my classrooms are basically like self-serve. Like once you understand what the rules are, like I put all the stuff out and like, we just go and we do it, and in many ways it is kind of like, kind of keeping this sort of delicate balance and the politics or whatever. But I give credit, just like with the musicians, I might come up with an idea, but it's also important for me to remember that someone contributes something that I need to make sure we incorporate that. Well, just like with my students, if, I say, well, this is the lesson or this is what we're doing. And they'll say, well, can we do this? And like, my seventh grade class at the school I teach at now, it started out as a straight up journalism class. but because I did a lot of work with tech and whatever else. And I said, well, my first year, we went strictly totally online. My second year, I said, hey, do you guys want to do blogs? Then we started doing vlogging in the middle of it. And like one of my kids was like a genius with Final Cut Pro. And
nice.
so like my third year with it, we like went full bore, like journalism, blogging, whatever, and really like turn them loose. And it's like once the kids know that you're pretty, that they can trust that you can make, like let's make a mistake, and if we'll fix it, here in the mix, if you will, and then before we turn it out, so. And it's the same thing. I mean, it's literally like just finding out personalities and just making sure people get along and stuff like that. But the funnier part was after Katrina, I had to live by my wits, and because I had a client base of people I worked with, and people were like, you can teach music, and I'm like, oh, I'm horrible at that. It's like, what do you mean you're horrible at that? You work with people in sessions and stuff. I'm like, yeah, but that's adults. And they said, nah. I said, yeah, you're right. Some of the musicians you meet along the way are kind of immature and like,
it's totally different. It's a totally different beast.
Yeah, but it ended up working out pretty well. Like doing the teaching the music thing, and that actually showed me something about what I could actually do. That when I did return to the classroom, there were like a whole bunch of lessons that I had learned from that I just kind of worked into it. But sometimes you got to be the big bad tyrant. But it's the same thing like when you're on stage or like for a gig or something, like, be here on time, or we got to do these songs, or we got to do that, or this is what this is about. And there are other times where you can like let loose and say, this is this group of people, we can do this, or this class, kind of thing. It's the same sort of thing. So
sometimes you do have to be the tyrant, though. It's totally true.
Oh yeah. Well, I tell people all the time, like, I'm really good with group work and stuff like that, but like when it comes to like the creation point, I'm a complete tyrant. Like I got to create it here. I'll come with the idea, and then we can take it a million different ways. What's been great about the different groups I've worked with is I'll have the same tune and I'll play with different bands, and each band puts its own sort of stamp on it. And and so I have recordings of those live recordings of the same tune, and they're not. It's not that they're wildly different. It's just that they're different players, and so each player are in the personality of that individual plus the personality of the band is really what makes it different in that way, and it's great. It's really, really cool.
So for people who have never seen Nardy Boy live before, you guys are playing a show. You're playing a show with Tash Neal, who I spoke to last week, at FTC on July 23rd. For people who haven't seen Nardy Boy live yet, describe what it's like. What's a Nardy Boy show like?
It's a dance party. It's, and I say it like that, just matter of fact, like essentially if you feel the groove and you want to dance, just dance the whole time. We try to keep it up tempo to mid tempo mostly. We might do like a sort of slower song, but it's like, come express yourself. If you are into like hardcore dancing, whatever, or you want to just kind of stand there and bop against the wall, that's perfectly fine. When I first started playing in the area in '97 at Amberjacks, the guy who hired us, Steve Baranchea, was like, he had done some work in New Orleans for years. And he's like, oh, I want the first set to be like this. I want the second set to be like this. And then the third set, I just want you to blah. And he said some words I can't repeat. And I said, okay, I know what you're talking about. So like the first set, we're playing like this laid back kind of jazz kind of stuff. And he comes by and says, okay, you add a little more blues to it or whatever. So we're like finishing into the first set, going into the second set. We like a little more blues, play a little more Zydeco. Second set, a little more mid-tempo stuff. By the third set in Amberjacks, and I don't know if you ever went to that scene down there in Sono where it was insane at the time that I was playing down there.
Yeah.
And like, so third set came on, and I said to people, I literally said on the microphone, y'all can dance. I said, we're not one of these bands. I said to them, we're not one of these bands that want you to appreciate what I said. We'll appreciate it more if you dance to it. And that's all I needed to say. So after that, I think we played there like every other Saturday. And people would come and literally, they'd want to start dancing in the first set. And we're like, no, we can't. But like it started to become a thing. Like second set, more people were dancing to the mid-tempo stuff because like some of them were like into like the more like second line feels and the Zydeco feels we're playing, and then that might be their thing. So it's really and truthfully, it's just kind of like whatever your vibe is, and like as long as you don't step on someone else's good time, we're good with that. But like it's you know, and then if it takes you a little while to get worked up, cool. You know, it yeah, it's a good time. It's fun. You know, or I hope it's fun. You know, so.
It's definitely fun, dude, and I'm
Yeah.
pumped about it, man. So yeah, FTC, July 23rd, Nardy Boy. And also before we get out of here too, if you want to hear what this band sounds like ahead of time, this Sunday on 95.9 The Fox, we've actually got 3 songs from Nardy Boy that we're gonna be playing. I went with The Journey because I loved the way you described it in the email to me. I'll leave it as a little bit of a mystery for people who want to tune in, but I did. I love the way you described that song. I threw, and of course I had to throw Funky People in there because
Good,
that's
good.
just the song that I connect you with forever from seeing it, at New Year's and at Mardi Gras and all the different times.
That song is totally like, so even though it's like obviously a very New Orleans funk based tune, that song is totally about like that came because of Black Rock, of playing at the
Yeah.
acoustic. You know, like just the people who would come, and it could be 5 people, it could be 50 people, and they just come and they do their thing. And you know, it was just, it was sort of like, you know, it made perfect sense. But so as much as it's an anthem for everybody who's like, you know, in that vibe, it's and the other thing that's funny is that a lot of the tunes that we very consciously wrote over the years, I'm always like, for all the literary stuff that I do outside of music and stuff, I made a conscious effort to like go with like really simple, repetitive, like direct lyrics in a lot of cases, because it, you know, it sort of enhances the anthem quality, but it's also just kind of way we relate to the audience. Like, you know, we sing a few words and then we play, and then we sing a few words and play, and then we take off. And then so it's really the music that it becomes about, and the music is there for people to just like get their groove on. You know, so if we're saying too many things, you know, it takes away from that. So yeah, I'm glad you chose that one. That's
Oh yeah,
fun.
man. No, I had to. I had to. Well, Renard, dude, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me tonight, man.
Thank
Once
you.
ag- oh, you got it, dude. Once again, for people out there, if you want to hear some Nardy Boy this Sunday at 9 p.m. on 95.9 The Fox, you can tune in 95.9 FM. We're gonna open with 3 songs from Nardy Boy. If you don't live in Fairfield County, you can go to 959thefox.com. You can listen in there. And yeah, Nardy Boy at FTC, July 23rd. Make sure you're there. Tickets are still available, dude. Renard, thanks again, man.
Thanks again, John. You be good. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, man. Stick around for 1 sec. And then for people at home, thank you for watching. We'll